Are you just really confused with all the information out there about when your baby should be dropping naps, 3 naps to 2, 2 to 1, completely dropping them forever? We never want that day to come. You're checking in with all your baby mates because they seem to be doing it much quicker than you, and you're not sure whether you should be doing it at the same time, but actually your baby is quite happy rocking out 2 naps a day, but actually your friends are getting a bit more freedom because their kid's only gone down to 1. It's really confusing, and does it even really matter when those transitions happen? So this video today is talking through all of that information, telling you exactly what you need to know, and if it does really matter, and how to make those transitions so that sleep doesn't get disrupted elsewhere. So let's start. Let's start with the younger babies. So around about 6 months of age is when your baby's probably going to be taking about 3 naps a day. Hopefully one nice morning nap of around about an hour, hour and a half. The same for the lunchtime nap. And lunchtime might be somewhere around midday. So about an hour, hour and a half there if you're lucky. And then what we call a cat nap in the afternoon. So that might be anywhere from 30 minutes to 45 minutes, probably when you're out and about in the buggy, something like that. It's just a little bit of sleep to help them get through until bedtime. So that's around about 6 months. It might be, that your baby's got there a bit earlier at 5 months or just a little bit later, but around that zone. The next milestone is going to be transitioning from 3 naps down to 2, so dropping that 3rd cat nap, and that's going to be around month 8 or 9. So how do you know that your baby is ready to do that? So what they're going to be doing is just pushing through that cat nap, or fighting through it. So hopefully not too much of a battle, but it will probably mean that that they're either still going to sleep for that cat nap, but it's getting much later, and then kind of bedtime is getting later as well, or that they're dropping off and it's just getting shorter and, they're hardly taking any sleep, or the fact that you're trying to get them to sleep and they're just not going. So perhaps you're going on a buggy walk, or, they're in the sling, a carrier, and they're just not dropping off like they used to. So that's a good indication that they're ready to drop it and that they're in that zone of time. So around about around about month 8 or 9. So what can you do to manage that? And like I said at the beginning, is it important? And yes, it is important that you manage that transition, but how easy your baby will transition is, like anything, down to them and how sleep sensitive they are. But if you just think about it, the naps that are going to stay are the morning nap and that lunchtime nap, but that lunchtime nap is going to get later. So whilst at the moment it might have been around about maybe midday, something like that, it's going to need to get a little bit later. So what your baby will be doing is stretching their wake period, so the time that they're able to stay awake and feel comfortable before they need to go to sleep again. So the morning one generally still happens around about the same time, probably about 2 hours, 2.5 hours after they've woken up. And then that lunchtime one will gradually get later. But if you think about it, when they are making that transition, they're going to have a big gap from the time that they woke up from that lunchtime nap to bedtime. And if that gap is too long, it can cause all sorts of problems. It can cause night waking because they're overtired, and early mornings as well. So if you see those things creeping in and your child has just made that transition, it could well be that they're overtired and they need an earlier bedtime to help manage that overtiredness. So gradually eking them forward and stretching those wake windows of time is really going to help them and help you. The next transition is going to be from 2 naps down to 1, and this zone is much bigger now, and this tends to be what happens as we go through with the nap transitions. So the transition from 2 down to 1 is between about 15 months of age to 18 months of age, so a much bigger transition there. This one I tend to see a little bit more disruption with in terms of when it happens. But yeah, just in the same way as you would transition from 3 naps down to 2, it's going to be kind of bridging those naps together. So bringing the morning nap forward or a little bit later, and the lunchtime one earlier. So it might well be that your baby wants to push through, or your toddler then, your toddler wants to push through the first nap of the day, the morning nap, and then they're happy to take the lunchtime one, or the other way round. So they are the signs that you want to be looking out for. So again, they will be either fighting one of those naps by telling you, I don't want to go. You might be putting them down and it's taking longer and longer for them to fall asleep. So actually, by the time they fall asleep, it might be an hour after you've put them down. And then it's kind of creeping into the rest of the day. They're still taking a nap, but then they don't want to go for their afternoon nap, or that afternoon nap gets much, much later. And again, bedtime gets thrown out again. Or you might just put them in their cot and they're singing, chatting, babbling, and, quite content to be in there, but not going to sleep. Now, those behaviours that I've described there need to happen for a consistent period of time for us to really know that your child is ready to transition. So, those things you need to look for within the 15-month to 18-month zone. And I would say if that behaviour is displayed for consistently a week and going on for 2 weeks, then you can probably be assured that it is time for them transition. You might have days where they do want to take 2 naps, and days where they're quite happy to take 1, or they might transition really easily just to cut it out and then they can go straight through. Much like the transition from 3 naps down to 2, you need to help manage that because those wake windows of time are going to be much longer. The sticking points you might get there is that your baby likes to go for a mid-morning nap of around about 11 o'clock because they can go a little bit more in the morning, but actually they can't quite make it to lunchtime. And the trouble with that is that afternoon gap is really, really long. And like I said before, if that awake period in the afternoon is too long and your baby is going down to bed at night time overtired, it can really start to cause those other problems, especially early mornings. So again, in the initial days, it might well be around 11 o'clock that your baby's going down, but you've got to try and eke that later and later to 11:30, 12, 12:30, and then eventually it's probably going to settle around the 1 o'clock mark. So bear in mind that you're going to need adjust feeding times, so lunchtime, around about those hours there. So a top tip that I give to my families after working with them, because they're always asking these questions about nap transitions, is to offer some food, some lunch before your baby goes to sleep, and then some after, so that they can finish off their lunch afterwards, rather than trying to speed feed them before they go down and they go down with a really full tummy, or stretching them too much and having their nap and then them eating afterwards. So maybe just a big snack before, or half the lunch and then half afterwards. The big thing to note about this nap transition is that I see a lot of the time nap strikes happening around about the 12-month mark. Now, what is a nap strike? A nap strike is like what it says, your baby is going on strike and they don't want to nap. So they're either pushing through one of their naps, first nap, the second nap, and that's happening quite consistently, maybe a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, then they're napping again, and then they're going on the strike again. Lots of families think that about this time, okay, well that's happening, baby must be ready to drop down to 1 nap. And they go with that. Again, maybe some of their baby friends are doing the same with their children, and they seem to be coping fine in it. But don't compare your child and their sleep needs to the sleep needs of another child. They're completely different. Now, the problem with transitioning too soon is, like what I've said, it can cause other sleep challenges really quickly. So you'll start to see maybe some resistance at bedtime. That resistance is because they're overtired when you're trying to put them down. You might see some night wakings when nights have been really settled before, or you might see some early morning rising, which can be really tricky to unravel. Once it's set in, it can take a long time to get rid of. So if this is happening around about the 12-month mark, and I see this happening all the time, just think to yourself, okay, it's probably a nap strike, and all you need to do is to keep doing what you have been doing and putting your baby down to sleep. You can't force them to sleep, but you can create that environment and create that routine. And what tends to happen is that, you might have a blip for a couple of weeks, and then naps will settle down again, and you'll be back into your normal 2-nap routine until they get to about 15 to 18 months. So that was that transition. The final one is when your dear child is going to drop their naps entirely. Now, for some of you, this can be really upsetting because it's about having that bit of time for ourselves to get chores done, just to have a break. And for others of you, it might be a welcome to your home because it does mean a lot more flexibility in terms of you being able to be out and about of the house. To go and do activities because perhaps your child doesn't sleep that well in the buggy or in the car or on the go. And again, the window of time for your child to drop their naps entirely is much, much bigger. So it can be anything from 2 years of age all the way up into 4 years of age, probably the time that perhaps maybe they're starting to go to school, and that it might be forced upon them. So a really, really large period of time and very individual for your child and your circumstances at home. And just like what I've described before, the same behaviours will apply in terms of them not wanting to go to sleep, pushing through it, singing, chatting, or that nap coming much later, and then it's encroaching into bedtime. And that's a popular thing that I see, that families say, well, they were still quite happy to take a nap, but they weren't going down until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they weren't ready to go to bed until 9 p.m. What I would say with that scenario is, if your child has been taking stellar naps in the day of between, 1 to 3 hours, and it's on the larger side, you might want to cut that nap down a little bit just to create a little bit more sleep pressure in the evening and a bit more drive to sleep at bedtime so that you can still keep that nap and still keep a reasonable bedtime. But other things can trigger that nap wanting to be dropped, and your child might not be ready if they're if they're 2. I would say it is a little bit early, but lots of things can happen around that mark that might mean that your toddler wants to stop that nap. Maybe they're transitioning to another room at nursery where other older children are not having naps anymore, and they don't want to do it because they see that they're having fun rather than going to sleep. Perhaps there's some changes at home. Perhaps the arrival of a sibling can come along at that same time, and your child thinks, well, I don't want to go to sleep because new baby is hanging out with mum. I want to be up as well. Or perhaps you have transitioned your toddler to their own bed, and that newfound freedom means that they don't want to stay in their bed and they want to get up and hang out. So there can be lots of reasons that are driving that nap to be dropped, and it might be a little bit early. So just along the lines of those nap strikes, I would really try your best to keep your child napping for as long as possible, because just again, it may be causing problems in other areas of sleep. So if you are starting to see challenges with sleep arising and your child has dropped a nap recently, or it tends to tie in that nap dropping with when those challenges have started, it could well be because they are overtired. So that is something that I can help you with, but hopefully just that general information there around naps can help you to know what to look out for, how to manage it, and it is really important. So good to see you. I will see you again in the next video. Take care for now. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell to get notifications of new videos coming out. Take care.